Because any doctrine of assurance must take into account the very real possibility of apostasy and the necessity of perseverance. And I want to say that first I want to say what assurance is not. Right? Oftentimes people would say something like, well, if you took away the doctrine of once saved, always saved, how could I ever be assured of my salvation? And really, people have a false understanding of what their assurance is too, because the way that some people think about assurance, it's that I'm saved and I can't lose it. So that it rules out any possibility of there being something like apostasy. But you see, we need to take seriously what Paul says in the 27th verse of chapter 9. Let me read this to you again and just feel the weight of what Paul says. But I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. Did the Apostle Paul have assurance of salvation? Well, I believe he did, but it was also coupled with Paul knowing that he says, I discipline myself. And this is the Apostle Paul speaking, who can say in another context, I ran harder than anyone. Paul says that he disciplines himself. He keeps himself under control lest he be disqualified. Right? Lest after preaching to others that he himself wouldn't finish the race. Where we need to feel the weight of Paul saying that. I think that assurance, you see, it needs that popular version, it needs to be recast, because assurance is not that I cannot fall away. That is, assurance is not that there is no possibility of apostasy. True biblical assurance is that I will not fall away. Right? That by God's grace, I will persevere to the end. Knowing full well, right, that like the earlier analogy that we gave, right, if a husband just said, hey, I'm going to abandon my wife and my family, I'm not going to go to church anymore, I'm not going to do these things, but it'll be fine, I'll be saved. No, we need to realize, no, if we did that, or would we be falling away? Yes, but by God's grace, I'm determined to never let that happen. So, right, so true biblical assurance, right, we, in relying on God's grace, are determined that nothing ever keep us from reaching the finish line, and that by God's grace, all right, we will press on towards the goal.